most of the startups thrive on gut and instinct. But fail, those instincts actually start failing. One of our fastest hiring sources had a 30% higher dropout rate within 6 months. Every delay in hiring means lost revenue opportunity. Productivity tracking felt like a surveillance. Our analytics showed us that teams with quarterly check-ins were more engaged and far better performers than those waiting for annual reviews. Scaling from 12 to 600 people in a few years is like changing the tires of a car while driving at full speed. Learning never stops at whatever level you work on, right? A lot of companies invest in systems only because it's fashionable, but they don't really ask what problem are solving. HR analytics is not about fancy dashboards. HR tech can be both a blessing as well as a distraction.
The People Puzzle is brought to you by Bridgeview Search Partners, an executive search firm specializing in mid to senior level hiring. With your host, Reet Rathore from the HR practice at Bridgeview, let's solve today's People Puzzle together. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the People Puzzle. Today we're very excited to welcome Anurag Darira, who's the head of human capital at Encash, which is Asia's first and smartest spend management platform. With over 16 years of experience in fast-growing fintech startups and tech companies, Anurag has built HR functions from scratch using analytics to transform hiring, performance management, workforce planning, etc. He's also recognized as LinkedIn Top Voice and is one of the top 50 HR leaders in the BFSI sector for 2024. I think he blends strategic insight with hands-on execution, driving innovation and engagement, diversity, and of course, aligning people's strategy with business goals. Our discussion today actually tackles two very key challenges in modern HR. One is how to basically turn data into actionable insights that fuel talent decisions and growth. And the second one would be how to create agile, flexible people systems that can pivot very quickly to meet the demands of rapid scaling, market shifts, and evolving talent needs. These are very complex challenges, of course, that require, more than tools. They demand new mindsets, they demand new capabilities. And I'd say very few have sort of mastered this balance. And we're very excited and eager to hear Anurag's perspectives and experience. Hey, Anurag, thank you so much, for coming on board. Welcome to the People Puzzle. And we're so excited to have this conversation with you.
The pleasure is all mine, Reet, and thank you so much for a very warm welcome and a very generous introduction, I must say.
Perfect. So before we sort of dive in into our theme, Anurag, I'd love to sort of start with your journey. So I'm sure like our listeners would love to know how you, traversed like diverse industries and organizational stages in your 16-year career. So could you take us through that journey? Like what initially drew you to HR and how, has your philosophy evolved over time? What would you say are some, defining experiences that shaped your approach in general to human capital?
Sure. So let me begin with what drew me to HR, right? So
Yeah.
if people have gone through my profile, who would realize that I have not been into HR from the start of my career. So it was a very different experience for me. Initially, with a couple of BPOs and KPOs, getting into the wave and understanding the night life kind of things as well while working.
Yeah.
But what drew me into HR during those days was also, I could say that it is about my curiosity around people, right? In terms of what motivates them, how teams come together, and how culture plays an important part in inspiring business outcomes, right? So it very bluntly, I would say, it was the opportunity to work at the intersection of people and business, where culture, talent, strategy, everything comes together. And I'm been fascinated by how the right people practices can directly fuel growth as well as transformation.
Yeah.
If I talk about my career, Reet, it has been interesting journey until now, where my career you could possibly look at as a blend of two different worlds, right? Large corporates and fast moving startups. So part of my journey, right, with larger corporates, I learned the discipline of processes, compliance, structure, and these were environments where policies were set in stone and execution was about consistency at scale. Right? That grounding gave me a very strong foundation in HR best practices, labor laws, and even managing larger workforce. Then came a shift in my career where I moved into fintech startups like Rubik and later Engash. And that the defining moment of my career and a very different ballgame altogether, if I could put it across that way. At Rubik, when I joined, we were only about 12 odd people. It was a market for retail and commercial loans. And we scaled to over 600 people in a very short span of time.
Yeah.
Our HR wasn't just about compliance, it was about survival. So we were wearing
Yeah.
multiple hats, just like how, a typical HR guy should. So it was about recruiting, it was about again shaping the culture, aligning your HR objectives to business strategies, and ensuring people stayed motivated even during volatile times. So that is something that I went through at Encash. And at Rubik. And then I joined Encash, once again given the responsibility to build up the HR function from scratch, pulled up my sleeves, and in just 12 months, we scaled the workforce by almost about 200%.
Yeah.
Bigger challenge there was keeping engagement and culture intact while growing so fast. So, if I have to really reflect on my journey, I would say the corporate world has taught me structure and governance, and the fintech or the startup world has taught me agility and resilience. And that is where I drive major part of my HR philosophy today as well, which is about balancing both, right? You need to build systems that scale, but at the same time, you also need to ensure that they remain flexible enough to adapt faster than the market.
Of course.
This is the balance that I would say has defined my overall leadership approach as well.
Yeah, that's actually very, very well put, Anurag. Thank you so much for, I think, putting it that way. Your journey has been very interesting, and especially with like bigger companies and then to startups and the kind of scale and growth that you have seen also. So, yeah, very happy to know your curiosity about people is what got you started into like HR in the first place. I think that is a motivating factor for a lot of people who choose this path too. Great. So let's, I think, start with data. I think in many startups and growing companies, people decisions, often begin as like gut instincts or like founder biases, which is like understandable in early or scrappy, sort of an environment. So how do you think you moved from that instinct driven approach to like one that's governed by like HR analytics and data driven decision making? So can you also share some examples, of meaningful analytics, that changed the way hiring or performance management happened at Encash or Rupee?
Sure. I must say that it's a very real observation that you've made because most of the startups thrive on gut and instinct, right? So founders and leaders would often say, I feel this person is the right person. I believe this team is struggling. But fail, those instincts actually start failing because the organizations become just too complex. So in Cash, when I joined, we were hiring aggressively. Actually wanted to see whether our hiring is effective or not. So we tracking not just the time to hire, but also post-joining data like early attrition and performance scores. We found out was actually eye-opening. One of our fastest hiring sources had a 30% higher dropout rate within 6 months. So it looked efficient on paper. It was costing us stability. Once we shifted our investments towards sources with higher retention, the quality of hiring automatically improved, and it also helped us achieve 80% retention rate at senior levels. So that was a very big achievement for us during the early stage of our journey. Similarly, if we talk about performance management as well, Reet, our analytics showed us that teams with quarterly check-ins were more engaged and far better performers than those waiting for annual reviews. That helped is convince leadership to adopt a continuous feedback model. So if you ask me, HR analytics is not about fancy dashboards, right? It's about using data to challenge assumptions and guide conversations.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a very sort of compelling evolution. So, like moving from, intuition to like data, it actually really marks like a maturity sort of a space in the HR function as well as the business impact. And I have to say, it's very interesting how analytics not only shaped your hiring approach, but also sort of influenced performance management cadence. So building on to that, I'd love to sort of understand more about tools and technologies that you guys have used to like, along the way, any digital platforms to like streamline processes, recruitment, and how do you also balance technology adoption with the need for like human judgment in sensitive HR areas?
Right, right. So, talking about HR tech, right? What
Yeah.
I can say is HR tech can be both a blessing as well as a distraction. And why I say that is because I've seen a lot of companies invest in systems only because it's fashionable, but they don't really ask what problem are we solving.
Hmm.
So at Encash, when we decided to implement HRIS, we designed it in a way which could answer questions around real business problems. How
Hmm.
fast are we hiring? Where are the skill gaps? Are we staying compliant as we expand? So
Hmm.
dashboards for us were not just pretty charts. They gave us real-time visibility into hiring velocity, succession gaps, and even team health.
Hmm.
For example, a very interesting case. Initially, all our compliances were manual in nature, right?
Hmm.
We built our compliance into the HRIS itself so that statutory filings, the labor law checks, and leave rules could be automated. What this for managers specifically, they did not need to worry, rather focus on people knowing that the systems had compliance covered. Yes.
Hmm.
In my view, HR tech must generate insights that change decisions. And if
Yeah.
dashboards aren't really helping leaders make better calls, they are just vanity metrics. So
Hmm.
technology is only as good as the questions you design it to answer.
Hmm. Yeah. That actually makes a lot of sense. I think, with these compliance issues and all of these extra things that managers in general have to, focus on, putting all of that into the HRIS and still like keeping the human touch is, I think, what is like more important because, these the tools act as accelerators, but they can't really obviously replace the human sort of touch, which is so important. So I think, yeah, that's a great perspective on automation, freeing up managers to like
Yeah.
focus on people and not paperwork. But I'm curious to know if you could like because this sounds like a very interesting examples. I'm sure like a lot of listeners can implement. Could you give me some specific examples of systems where in-house tools or any other tools that you've used have brought in this tech-driven
Yeah.
efficiency?
Yeah. So, very frankly, Reep, my inclination towards systems and tools actually, increased when I started working for the startups because that is where the
Hmm.
challenges with data are, right?
Hmm.
And that is where I also realized that, as in HR, the HR functions run on the same principles as business, right? It needs
Yeah.
data driven, it needs to be digital first, and our systems must be scalable. So
Hmm.
definitely play a very big role in how we build efficiencies and insights.
Hmm.
Take for example my experience at Ruby. So
Hmm.
we're a fintech marketplace ourselves, right? So naturally we
Yeah.
have an appetite for automation. So
Hmm.
we developed an in-house proprietary matchmaking algorithm. Particularly on the business side, it was for retail and SME lending. But this
Hmm.
company had customers. This platform also gave HR data on which roles and teams were directly driving business outcomes. And
Hmm.
on the people side of things, we built simple Google Suite automations for things like leave tracking, candidate funnel dashboards, monthly headcount analytics, because this became important because of the scale that we saw in a very short period of time. If I talk about my current stint with Cash, we went even a step further. So we
Hmm.
introduced an HRMS platform as the core HRIS, but then we did not just let it be the way it is. We actually layered custom built in-house dashboards over it. For
Okay.
example, we designed a hiring velocity tracker that shows real-time tags by functions and funnel stage. We
Hmm.
automated our entire performance review system, linking OKRs to business outcomes through quarterly check-ins.
Oh.
The very big win for us was we developing our own rewards and recognition platform, which meant appreciation to employees became instant and visible, which grew
Hmm.
engagement scores as well. And let me
Hmm.
also mention here that this rewards and recognitions platform that we've developed has now become one of our business solutions, which we are also offering to our customers and clients. So it's become a revenue
Oh.
in itself.
Wow. That's amazing.
So whether it is an in-house algorithm, whether it is a SaaS HRIS or these simple dashboards, what I believe is on a few things where you automate the hygiene, you analyze the data, and free leaders time to focus on coaching and strategy.
Yeah, actually, that does make a lot of sense. If I'm not wrong, initially at Rubik, I'm so sorry. You mentioned that you had like an internal platform that you guys had built out, and with Encash, it's basically an HRIS platform that you guys have, and you've customized it based on your company's needs, and also built an internal like rewards and recognitions platform, which also you're serving right now as one of the solutions to other companies.
Correct.
Got it. That's actually very interesting. Thanks so much for letting me know. Um, so what would you say were like some of the critical HR metrics or like data points that you focused on to sort of demonstrate like clear business impact? For example, like improving time to hire, quality of hire, or like any predictive, performance indicators.
Yeah.
What would you say that you tracked and why?
Working for high growth startups, right? I think a couple of metrics you already mentioned while asking this question. So
Yeah.
important metric for us becomes hiring velocity, right? Which lets you
Hmm.
the TAT from requisition to onboarding, because every delay in hiring means lost revenue opportunity. So this is one metric that we track very closely. Uh, Another very important metric for high growth environments become your ramp up time, which means that
Hmm.
quickly your new hires, especially in sales and being a tech intensive organization, technology
Yeah.
well, become product,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we came up with certain role based academies as well, kind of customizing, all the training models for these folks in different functions. And we could
Hmm.
cut, as far as I remember, we did this analysis about 6 months back, and we realized that our ramp up time had come down by almost about 30% in case of new
Oh.
hires. Yeah. Another very important metric that I believe, as in HR, we should track is engagement to attrition linkage. Many at
Hmm.
both engagement and attrition are run in parallel and independently, but there is a very
Yeah.
strong linkage between the two, right? So where what we did is we ran pulse surveys and I built dashboards which would correlate these scores with attrition risk in critical teams, right? So this is
Oh.
where you start envisaging and anticipating where your key folks or key resources could go and what could be the reasons. This
Yeah.
would help us also reduce our regretted attrition of high performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quality of hire, manager effectiveness, and even compliance are a few things that, being in a fintech and a regulated environment, these things become very important for us.
Yeah. So yeah, since we're I think speaking about the fact that you guys had dashboards for like quite a few things with respect to performance management, etc. Do you think at any point, the fact that there are a lot of tools tracking productivity constantly or like consistently has actually led to employees feeling either demotivated or motivated? How do you think that's worked out? Like, how do you think the response of the employees in general has been with your introduction to analytics in the company?
Yeah, again, Reet, I must say it's a very important and a very real question that you asked, because I do believe productivity tools can cut both ways, right? If employees feel like they are being monitored, it creates a lot of anxiety and disengagement.
Yeah.
What is important is that they see these tools as something that supports their success and that it becomes motivating. Right? So we also had a lot of thought through before we could implement such tools within Encash and also in my previous organizations. So if I talk about Encash, right, when we wrote dashboards around hiring velocity, ramp up time, and even productivity, we were very conscious to not frame them as surveillance. Instead, we positioned them as coaching tools. I can give you an example as well where a sales rep's dashboard wasn't about tracking how many calls the salesperson is making in a day. It was showing that salesperson how quickly they were ramping up, what conversion levers were working for them, also where managers could step in to help.
Yeah.
And more importantly, these tools need to be as transparent as possible, right? Where employees could see their own data, they could compare their performance against benchmarks and even higher performers for that matter. And these tools also, in a lot of ways, enabled managers to have conversations as starters and not as a thing. Right. So this approach actually lifted motivation because people felt recognized for progress rather than just for gaps, and that is where the issue happened. And I think this by my own experience because I also saw a flip side of it in one of the previous organizations where actually productivity tracking felt like a surveillance. It resulted in rise in attrition, especially in middle management. This experience taught me to always humanize the numbers, talk about what's working well, celebrate quick wins, and make sure tools are framed as enablers and not inspectors. Because we are not policing anymore. We are enabling people to do their job well. So that is what
Yeah.
it is. So if you just to summarize, what I just mentioned, I see productivity tracking works if it feels like a mirror and a guide and not a
Yeah.
microscope.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very well said, actually. How you position and how you actually, uh, show these tools, like in general, to your employees, I think plays like a very important role with respect to how they feel about it as well. That makes a lot of sense. And uh, I think the coaching tools part of things is a very smart, I think, smartly, well worded part that you mentioned. So I think that's also,
Just to add here, it's not just about what you say, but it's also about how you exhibit things, right? Many
yeah.
would say that these are coaching tools, but if it does not come out in your daily behaviors,
Hmm.
particularly from leaders, right, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah, yeah. I can understand. But I think in general, like your focus on like productivity beyond sales, including like these broader operational functions, really, it does highlight the depth of like HR's role in business performance as well. We'll be like switching gears a little bit now. We'll talk about, the second topic at hand today, basically scaling people systems faster to like match rapid sort of a growth. So you did mention to me that Rubik, during your stint over there, I think you guys scaled from like 12 employees to like 600 employees. It's obviously no small feat.
Yeah.
So I would love to sort of understand, how did you approach designing like HR processes and policies that were both like scalable and flexible to sort of adapt swiftly and like go through all of these scaling and all these changes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me tell you, Rita, I come across this question very often because at least from people who know how to big scale during those days and,
Yeah.
all we were able to do at that time. But simply if I have to put it in a one liner or give you an analogy, right? Scaling from 12 to 600 people in a few years is like changing the tires of a car while driving at full speed. So that's the kind of, rigor that it requires.
Yeah.
So in the early days, HR was just about making sure salaries got paid and people had laptops. The basic necessities were fulfilled there.
Yeah. Yeah.
As we scaled, those processes broke down quickly. What I believe is the key during that time was to think in phases of maturity, which we did. And we broke our scale into different segments, I would say. Uh,
Hmm.
so for the first 50 people, it was about speed, which is getting talent fast. Between
Hmm.
50 to 200, we introduced more structures, right? So you went about creating policies, driving engagement practices, and even getting robust performance review mechanisms in place. Right? The
Yeah.
talent started growing beyond 200 because that's
Hmm.
where your focus shifted from structures to leadership development to success
Yeah.
planning and even compliance being into lending
Yeah.
raise them, right?
Yeah.
Similar was the experience at Encash as well, because here as well, we scaled the workforce by 200% in a single year. So,
Oh.
however, what we did here differently was we built processes that could evolve every 6 months. I can give you an example here as well. So, recruitment, right? Initially, recruitment was more about ad hoc referrals and getting people from as many references as possible, right?
Hmm.
Moving to a structured analytics driven dashboards to understand which are those sources who are giving you most effective resources on board, so on and so forth. Right? Even our engagements when we were a small team were very casual in terms of our lengths, right? But then as and when the team size increased, we moved to pulse surveys with leadership action plans. So what I believe is you should design HR like Lego blocks, if I could put it across that way, where you build what you need today, but at the same time, you make sure it expands and reconfigures tomorrow. And I believe that is the only way to survive hypergrowth.
That actually makes a lot of sense, and I've loved the way that you guys have you had at both your companies like a phased maturity sort of a model that basically balances speed and structure, which is obviously very critical for startups. You already told me about how you guys basically planned that whole thing out, but I'd love to know what were some of the biggest challenges you faced during this scaling phase. I'm sure like a lot of our listeners would love to know and would be facing similar challenges. So, what were these challenges? How did you basically resolve them?
Sure. Sure. So, Reet, to be very honest, if I say that, we did not have any challenges and scaling people systems at the pace that we did was smooth, it would be a blatant lie. So, I would really believe it. And we did go through some real challenges as well. Uh,
Yeah.
Typically, these challenges you would see in most of the growth stage environments, right? And
Hmm.
if I could generalize it in a few form, the first challenge and the most critical one that I see is around speed versus structure, right?
Hmm.
So when you're doubling your headcount as we did in a year's time, the temptation was, just to hire and move.
Yeah.
What structure? You end up with role confusion, decision bottlenecks, and even uneven experiences, right?
Hmm.
How I tried to mitigate these challenges by introducing job architectures. It would clearly lay down the entire structure of a job, roles, responsibilities, reporting, career path, and a lot of things. And even come up with certain competency frameworks early on.
Hmm.
That growth does not really outpace the clarity of job. Was
Hmm.
important then.
Yeah.
Um, I think the second challenge that we did go through was our manager readiness.
Hmm.
Trust me, processes scale only as fast as your managers do.
Yeah.
At Rubik, when we jumped from 12 to 600 employees, middle managers struggled with coaching and performance conversations.
Hmm.
Attritions also spiked until we invested in manager capability programs. Right? Was
Hmm.
the second challenge. Uh,
Got it.
Third challenge, I would say, is around employee engagement during practice because um, at a hyper growth stage, right, people often feel processes are being rolled out really quickly.
Hmm.
That is where we need to build strong feedback loops and
Yeah.
ensure people felt heard. We did this at Encash, and our engagement scores also increased considerably.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, that's what's most important. I think there is a lot of structure that's needed, but also like at a low level, we have to understand that they cannot be victims of speed, and there's a lot of things that we have to think about as well. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that was a very well put, answer as well. I'd also like love to know how you make sure that your HR systems and talent strategies remain agile and aligned with like these fast moving business changes. So you mentioned that for certain problems that you were facing, you introduced like competency frameworks, you've introduced like compliance and design, etc. So how do you make sure that as and when like if the organization is at 100 right now, you guys have built up certain policies for 100 people. Once it scales to like the next 200, 300, of course the policies would have to change and shift. So could you tell us about any approaches that you introduced to like enable quick pivots without disrupting these people operation strategies that you had?
Quite a few, in fact, but let me tell you that startups pivot all the time, Ri. And
Yeah.
HR must pivot with them. So,
Hmm.
just to give you an example as well, at Rubik, right, when our product strategy shifted, so we had to change our business model as well. So what
Hmm.
effectively happened is that the sales KPIs had to be completely redefined. So, if I,
Okay.
as HR, had stuck to our old appraisal frameworks, employees would have been evaluated on irrelevant goals. Right? Instead, we realigned performance metrics within weeks, ensuring that rewards matched new priorities. Similarly, at Encash as well, when we added new verticals, we quickly adjusted our hiring frameworks, our pipelines, and even competency mapping. Right?
Hmm.
So, my principle is HR can't be a lagging function, right? If the business pivots to 30 days, we HR must pivot to 29 days.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think finding like the balance between introducing like new initiatives and letting the existing processes stabilize is also like a subtle art that people don't talk about much. And I think HR, in general, like the way that they handle it is actually very commendable as well. Speaking of agility, I'd say that there are like certain moments. Do you think that there are certain moments where your adaptable HR systems have actually sort of helped the business like avoid or like mitigate any kind of crisis? Can you tell us about like any critical moment while, being agile in your people systems help like save like a major setback or like a market downturn or a product pivot, anything of the sort?
Sure. See, more than the systems, I would possibly want to talk about certain approach, that we
Yeah.
kind of adopted while dealing with certain uncertainties, I would say, while at my stint with Ruby. So yes, at Rubik, the funding got delayed again, right? There was real anxiety. People
Yeah.
feared layoffs and top talent was looking out. And that is when I believed, during that time that if we had gone silent, we would have lost trust of our employees. Said
Hmm.
we took a very agile approach, as I said, we came up with a lot of open town halls. We did a lot of skip level connects and even casual coffee chats where it was the leadership team which addressed concerns directly, right? At the
Okay.
same time, what we also did is we rolled out a succession framework so people knew that their growth wasn't frozen. And the
Hmm.
result was pretty evident. Critical talent stayed. In fact, a few employees came and told me as well, if the market is uncertain, at least here, they know where they stand. And that transparency helped us bounce back faster than expected. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
agility is not about having no processes, right? Of course, you need to have processes, but it's also about being fast, transparent, and responsive to reality.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's striking how leadership transparency in general became like a very key cultural pillar during like tough times. I think that should move us to talk like further about culture building in general. So I think throughout like when we've spoken during this episode, you have given like a very strong emphasis on ownership and like resilience and like innovation, right? So what practical steps would you say, you guys took at Rubik and Encash to like nurture these kind of cultural traits? What initiatives and mindsets do you think would be critical in a situation like this?
So, talking about Rubik, there the culture was all about ownership and resilience, right? So we went through a lot of highs and lows during the journey. And one thing that we reinforced time and again was loyalty and accountability. So a lot of practices, particularly to do with recognition programs, I would say, were built around those values, right? So we would really, speak about people who have taken a lot of ownership at work. We would really talk about people who've gone beyond their regular roles and responsibilities to deliver for the organization, and also at the same time felicitate people who've been with us for a very long time, right? Because those are the guys who actually exhibit loyalty within the system.
Hmm.
Talking about Encash, here we emphasize more on the innovation. So we
Yeah.
created virtual innovation labs. These would be virtual spaces where teams could pitch ideas beyond their job roles. It's
Hmm.
also reinforced agility and creativity in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this is how we went about top building culture and even walking the talk in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to look at it. I think rewarding innovation and fostering like open communication in general sort of really brings culture to life beyond just slogans and talking about it. I think yeah. So shifting to I think now a little bit towards the leadership side of things. So scaling quickly obviously means like more new managers as well. So in your experience, in your 16 years of experience coaching leaders and like managers in general, what would you say are some unique, challenges or like needs that you've observed in like high growth and fast changing environments? How would you say you support the leaders to lead effectively amid like certainty as well, considering, the startup culture, like things are pretty uncertain?
Hmm. Yeah, I get where you're coming from, and that brings me to the statement that I made earlier, right? Your process would scale only as much as your leaders would scale, right? And
Yeah.
this remains to be one of a very critical challenge that most of the high growth companies go through even now. Because high
Yeah.
growth startups, at least like Encash, if I can talk about, the biggest challenge leaders face is keeping pace with the company's growth, right? So of
Hmm.
our managers were also first time leaders managing smaller teams initially. But
Yeah.
suddenly, since we grew exponentially in about less than a year, they were leading teams of 15, 20 people each. So the shift from being an individual contributor to a people leader was overwhelming for them.
Hmm.
So that is where, to support them, I introduced a concept called manager maturity index. Right? This was
Okay.
particularly a framework to assess leadership readiness across various aspects, which could include coaching, delegation, and even conflict management.
Hmm.
There, we built short, role relevant learning modules and
Hmm.
find them with one to one coaching. And we
Okay.
saw that the team engagement scores for these managers improved substantially, and attrition in their teams also reduced significantly. So they were more ready to manage these teams at scale. Right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Leadership
Got
support in startups can't really rely on traditional classroom programs, is what I believe.
Yeah,
Just
that's
in
true.
time learning. You need to come up with real coaching and even active mentoring to a certain extent.
Yeah. So were these like programs basically built out for succession planning as well? Or like do you guys believe in like promoting people internally? Do you think that these programs played like a role with respect to, how managers groom themselves as well?
Yeah, so this was more about growing people internally is what I would say, because as I said, right, being first time managers, joining us at a very early stage, trusting the organization to do well and give them those sort of opportunities also puts a responsibility, and it's also moral responsibility to a lot of extent, that these are the guys who get the initial or the first mover advantage, right, whenever the
Hmm.
company grows, rather than getting people from outside. But
Hmm.
as the organization grows, it also becomes important, Reet, to understand that not every talent or skill could be built in house, right? So that is where then
Yeah.
you balance things out with succession planning, with reskilling, upskilling, and also getting skills and talent from outside.
Yeah.
So it's a
That makes
very,
sense.
it's a very, I would say, minute or a very, sensitive balance between building teams in house and getting people from outside.
Yeah, that actually, yeah, very well said. I think in general, the kind of importance you give to like management, coaching the management actually plays like a very very important role in how the teams are turning out, of course. And I really appreciate how you emphasize like real time learning and the fact that it should always be dynamic. And the mentoring should always be there as key to like leadership success.
Right.
So scaling almost always involves this, and it also I'd say involves like a lot of tough structural changes, which brings me to my next question. What was, according to you, one of the most challenging HR transformations that you've led so far? What would you say that you learned from that experience that you'd probably want others to know, other HR leaders probably like leading transformations currently?
Sure. Since you mentioned the word structural changes, right? One thing that immediately comes to my mind, and one of the toughest transformations that I saw was at Ruby, because of a lot of reasons, right, which were very obvious that I've already spoken about. So when we were sailing
Yeah.
fast, right, funding delays actually forced us to restructure the teams, right? So that is where we started observing that the team morale was going down, the
Hmm.
productivity was getting hampered big time, and we risk losing critical talent, right? So we actually have to redesign the entire organization structure within a span of 4 weeks. That is where a few important steps that we took were clarifying the reporting lines, realigning roles to business priorities, and also introducing transparency first communication through various mediums. Could be monthly town halls, could be skip level connects, just casual chats, as I said, right? And if you ask me about the result, despite restructuring, despite going through consolidation, almost about 80 to 85% of our high potential talent stayed. And we stabilized faster than expected, right? So from this experience of mine, I think the biggest takeaway for me, Reet, was clarity beats uncertainty. I that
Hmm.
employees can handle change better when you're upfront, consistent, and visible. That becomes very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Could you also like shed some light on, what do you think is the best way to communicate these sort of changes? Because obviously they're very sensitive, and the way that you're communicating these changes to the employees also plays like a very important role. So, like any, like examples of that, any ways in which you can tell me how one should do it, right?
See, one of the very important, I think, coming back to leaders, right? What we would notice is leaders usually are not trained enough or skilled enough to handle such uncertainties, right? And that's
Mm.
where they also find it difficult to converse with their team members. So initially, what we did is, while a lot of conversation was something that we as HR or as leadership team were having ourselves, but what at the same time we also started doing in parallel is take leaders into confidence. There was a lot of time that I spent in coaching them on how to do conversations optimistically, right? So there is a message that needs to go around to the team members, but how do you exactly portray or put across those messages? And how do you exactly build positivity is something that we train these guys on. What
Yeah.
helped is leaders were actually advocates of the organization, right? And most of your team members, rather than looking up to somebody like in HR or a very senior leader at the management level, they would
Yeah.
look up to leaders first. This
Mm.
approach helped us also, bring about a lot of trust and confidence in the team members, right? And we also saw a lot of team members confided well, with their leaders rather than with us. So that kind of helped
Yeah.
us in a lot of ways.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that is a very good way. I think in general, whatever insights you have shared, I will just pause you and let you know that they have been like very insightful to me, very interesting to me. And I'm sure like our listeners are going to take away a lot from this episode as well. Looking back, actually, could you probably share, any challenge or any misstep that you faced, you took, or anybody like around you took that taught you like a significant lessons on how to like build people processes or systems, or how to not do something
Hmm.
something of that sort?
Yeah. So, see, learning never stops at whatever level you work on, right? Even after 16, 17 years of my experience, I still see that, we as individuals make mistakes, right? Some could be grave, some not so grave, right? But
Yeah.
across my stints, at least, the last couple of stints that I've had, a couple of things that I can speak about in terms of my learning or the mistakes, right? So when I was at Rubik, initially, I have just come from a large corporate into a new setup altogether. I actually made the mistake of introducing overly complex processes too early. Right? So I tried to bring corporate style frameworks when we were still about 20, 30 odd member team, right? What this actually resulted in, it slowed down the decision making and it started frustrating employees. That is where I learned that HR's maturity curve must match the company's maturity, right? So for
Yeah.
agile teams, processes need to be lightweight, flexible, and scalable. And it should be really rigid frameworks.
That makes a lot of sense. I think processes should be adapted to fit like the organization space rather than basically like rushing into things, and that's actually crucial learning. Finally, we're down to our last segment. Anurag, looking ahead. So, how do you think you see HR like evolving in general, especially like fintech startups, like as AI and like new ways of working have become very mainstream? What do you think HR professionals, should prepare for?
I think it's a very interesting question, I must say, Reed. And there is no one answer to it, to be very honest to you, because times are evolving and they're evolving really fast, right? However, how I see is the future of HR is about being a business growth driver, right? Fintech especially moves too fast for HR to be transactional for sure, right? We would
Yeah.
also see is we'll see more skill based hiring instead of just roles. There will also be more continuous learning ecosystems. And at the same time, there will be heavy use of AI in HRIS. But somewhere I believe at the core, HR will be measured not by how many policies it makes, but by how much it accelerates the business outcomes.
Mm.
Specifically in startups, HR is no longer back office. It's actually become a boardroom conversation, is what I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense, I think. And with respect to AI, what do you think? Do you think it's going to, you know, affect in any capacity, like HR roles, like the kind of work you mentioned, like HRIS? Yeah, that's important. But do you think in any capacity it will sort of replace human touch, or it has like chances of doing so?
See, let me be very honest with you. A lot of us, at least in HR, fear that our jobs will be taken away because of AI. But that is the
Hmm.
truth. That is what I believe. AI is actually going to help us do our jobs even better. It will help us do qualitative work more than the quantitative work. So how I divide, our competencies would be quality and quantity. Quantity, let AI take care of it in a much efficient and effective manner. Quality is something that we need to take care of by ourselves. And also let us all remember the fact that HR is about people, right? No matter how much ever you play around with the data, no matter how much ever analytics you do around certain things, right? Conversations can never be beaten by data. So the conversations, the more communications you have, the more insights you get from people. And that is what
Yeah.
HR is all about. Right.
Yeah.
So on me, it is, if I have to put it across, I would say empathy should be more prioritized compared to numbers.
That makes sense. That's actually very surprising coming from you because you are also, focusing on data and numbers. But yeah, I think
Data is very important, but not at the behest of conversations.
yeah, that makes sense. That's actually a very valuable, lesson. And in general, I think that forward-looking perspective on AI as an enabler and not a replacement, I think it hits the mark. I think we're close to closing now, and before we close, I would love for you to like sort of sum up, your HR philosophy in one sentence. Basically, if you had to like, speak to like the leaders of today and basically tell them something that you know would help them out, what advice would you say you give to them? And certainly like people who want to like build data driven agile people systems that truly empower growth and innovation, and of course like your philosophy in general, if there's anything you'd like to say to our listeners.
Sure. So, if I have to first answer the philosophy bit of it, I would say that build systems that scale, cultures that inspire, and processes that adapt faster than the market. Because in high growth environments, the only constant is change. And HR's role is to make that change a growth engine.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
to advise to the emerging HR readers, I think I would possibly be advising them threefold, if I can put it across that way. To start
Yeah.
with, I would say, as I said, right, empathy has to be before data. Your numbers are powerful, but it
Yeah.
only makes sense if you truly understand what employees and managers are experiencing. Right? Secondly, I would say build systems that scale, not just the processes. Right? To not really fall into the trap of manual fixes. What
Hmm.
we need to do is automate the hygiene part of things, implement the critical touch points, which includes your onboarding, check-ins, and a lot of other things. And then free yourself up to focus on coaching and strategy. And lastly, I would always want every emerging HR leader to remember that agility comes from iteration. It does not come from perfection. So the mind
Yeah.
experimenting fast and learning even faster is what allows us to stay resilient in a volatile market. So this is what us
Hmm.
to the emerging HR leaders would be.
That's amazing advice, actually. I think it's spot on. Thank you so much, Anurag. In general, I'd say I have to say that this has been a very, very insightful conversation for me and for our listeners, I'm sure. Thank you so much for candidly, sharing the depth of your experience, like all the practical wisdom, all the strategies, and like, the examples of what's worked and what's not worked. I'm really grateful that you like took the time to join us today. And I'm very confident that our listeners will walk away with like a lot of valuable lessons as well on how to like effectively blend data, technology, culture, agility, and everything else that we spoke about that truly drives success.
Yeah, thanks so much for calling me for this podcast, Reet. It's been a very good experience, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that you came up with certain questions, certain sites that I believe are real world scenarios currently. Me help leaders to make themselves better from your own. So thank you so much for giving the
Yes.
opportunity.
Thank you so much. That's actually that's our goal at this point of time. Hoping to reach as many emerging, inspiring HR people, HR leaders as possible. It's truly amazing to have you, Anurag. Thank you so much. And for our listeners, I think the key takeaway is clear. The future of HR lies in like blending data-driven insights with the agility to adapt quickly, all while building a strong culture that empowers people to like thrive amidst change and uncertainty and pivots, of course. Whether you're leading a fast growing startup or like steering transformation in an established business, I think it's this balance of analytics, flexibility, and human connection that will honestly set you apart. And I think that's what Anurag also has preached and has told us about. If you found value in today's episode, please make sure to subscribe to the People Puzzle for more candid conversation with HR leaders who are shaping the future of work like Anurag. Thank you so much. Until next time, keep solving the people puzzle.
Thank you.